Hey everyone, my name is Emily Ruff. I am an herbalist and I'm director of the Florida School of Holistic Living in Central Florida and also steward of the Sage Mountain Botanical Sanctuary in Central Vermont. And this is a second version of a conversation that was held on Saturday, March 31st about community health. And the purpose of this discussion is to share information that I have been gathering and synthesizing for the last few weeks about the coronavirus and how each of us can personally ensure our wellness and the health of our family, our loved ones, and our community. The intention of the conversation today is to help us all cultivate clarity and calm and courage in this time of great confusion and uncertainty. At the outset, I want to let you all know that I am not a medical doctor or practitioner, and no information that you find on a video or an article or a conversation with a friend who is not a medical practitioner should not substitute you seeking medical care urgently at the first sign of symptoms. And I will talk a little bit about those symptoms, but I want to encourage you to call your healthcare provider or your general practitioner at the first sign of symptoms. You are being encouraged not to go to a hospital or to a clinic for the sake of how contagious this virus can be, but to call your physician, or if you don't have a general practitioner, your local health department, so that you can be guided and directed based on your local municipality and what's going on in your region right now, what the best source is for moving forward with next steps of care. Before we begin discussing medical support, herbal support, and other ways we can cultivate self and community care during this time, I want to remind all of us that we are standing on the planet Earth that is always underneath us to support us and nurture us. We always have plant allies surrounding us to provide us support, and we always have our ancestors at our back, who many of whom have gone through many great difficulties to the nature of what we're all experiencing right now, and oftentimes much worse. And I like to remind myself of this as well as my students and clients, because in this time of great confusion and uncertainty, it can feel very lonely, can feel very anxiety riddled. And I have certainly found that remembering that the earth is supporting me, that the plants are around me, and that the ancestors have my back have been very important tools for me to remain in a state of calm and clarity and courage. As many of my friends and students and clients know, one of my greatest pieces of advice right now is to remember that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And so my emphasis on cultivating calm and clarity and courage is so that with each step that we take in this long marathon, we can ensure that our feet are landing gracefully and able to support the next step that we take. So many of you may feel a call to be constantly on top of the latest news or the latest reports from the CDC, things of that nature. Many of you are feeling called right now to prepare and stockpile. And I understand all of those urgencies. And I also hope that you are feeling just as called to remain in a state of calm, give yourself rest, give yourself nourishment and support. We'll be talking about some of the tools in your kitchen and in your backyard that can help with that support. But keeping the mantra in mind that this is a marathon and not a sprint is one way that we can all ensure that we are remaining patient and calm despite the urgencies, and able to know that as we take each individual step, that our foot is landing in the right place with enough support to help us take that next step forward after that. I know that many of you, like me, are feeling not only my own personal anxieties, but also feeling the collective energy around me of fear and uncertainty and confusion. And so, as we begin to explore ways that we can support ourselves and our community, one emphasis for me is to be able to separate the anxiety that is being felt in the collective right now from my own personal anxiety. And this is certainly by no means an easy practice, but the more that I can be aware of which feelings and which emotions are coming outside of me personally and coming from my community or the greater collective, as opposed to those that are really my personal anxieties and fears. This really helps me navigate those personal fears with more clarity and with greater calm. So I invite you, as you're feeling anxieties or confusion come up day to day, to really sit with what influences are coming from outside of you personally, especially for those of us that are watching the news or scrolling on social media a lot. I find that a lot of the anxieties I experience are not, in fact, my own, but are coming from those collective influences. So as you start to feel anxieties or confusion come up for you, sit for a moment and explore what of those are yours personally and what of those are coming from the collective energy that is surrounding us, especially those of us in dense urban areas. There are a lot of people around us holding their own personal anxieties, and it's very easy, especially for those of us that are more sensitive, to take that energy on as our own. As it relates to uncertainty, I want to remind you all that this is a novel viral infection. And that means that no medical practitioner before this time has ever dealt with this particular illness. We are making approximations as to symptoms and recovery and treatment in the greater healthcare system. But even some of our largest national and global health organizations have never touched this disease before. And many of us are making it up as we go. And I share that with you because this is a new time for all of us, no matter how prepared or what line of work or what area of the world we're in. There is a great collective uncertainty and confusion right now. And that does not diminish what I experience myself in terms of confusion or anxiety, but it helps me feel less isolated and lonely in those feelings, knowing that it is not just myself and my family and my smaller community, but my greater community and our whole society and planet that is stepping forward with a lot of uncertainty and confusion right now. And if I hold that awareness, it helps me understand a bit more clearly where this confusion is coming from, and the fact that we are all dealing with a lot of uncertainty right now. It's not just my uncertainty alone, and that in some way helps me feel less isolated as I'm walking through my anxieties, and also helps me understand why sometimes I'm receiving mixed messages or contradictory information from local doctors, from press releases, press conferences, global and national health organizations. There's a lot of contradictory information out there. And that's because this is a novel virus that's a new uncertain territory for all of us, medical practitioners and lay people alike. To that end, I'm going to be sharing a handout on our school's website with a number of resources that I encourage you to review and to follow because of their high level of regard and reputation, both in the herbal community and the healthcare community. I really discourage you from sourcing health information from social media, from memes, from every newsletter that you've gotten, from every business that you've ever subscribed to this week. Really focus on those national and global institutes and agencies which are responsible for our nation's healthcare, and also look to your local, state, and health department in your county. Look at organizations like American Herbalist Guild and American Herbal Products Association. And then also look to herbalists who have the clinical experience to navigate some of these uncertainties, even if they themselves have not currently treated this novel coronavirus. Some of the herbalists whose resources I share on my website of links include Larkin Bunce from the Vermont Center of Integrative Herbalism, Thomas Easley from the Eclectic School of Herbal Medicine, Dr. Aviva Ram, Seven Song. There are a number of herbalists, Lorna from the Herb Bus, number of great practitioners who are sharing some really practical tips and tools for prevention and protection and community care. I also have to lift up my herbal teacher and mentor, Rosemary Gladstar. She's the herbal fairy godmother for many of us in the Western herbal world, and her books, Medicinal Herbs: A Beginner's Guide or Herbal Recipes for Vibrant Health, are a great starting point for those of you who have never worked with herbs before, don't know the difference between an infusion or a decoction or a tincture. I encourage you to check out those books as great resources that can be a starting point for your herbal practice. The escalating speed at which the novel coronavirus has affected many of our communities is certainly alarming. It also opens for us the opportunity to care for our health like we've always aspired to. And what I mean by that is that many of us, myself included, can recognize areas of our daily life where we could make better health choices in the interest of optimal wellness. These choices are even more important in light of a greater pandemic and the call to keep our immune system as strong and healthy as possible. One of the areas that I'm aspired to care for myself right now is nourishment. There are a number of nutrients that are really coming to light as important for our immune health, especially in the age of this novel virus. Some of these include vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamins A and K, and zinc. Many of us can achieve an optimal intake of these nutrients from a balanced diet that's rich in plants, but some of us, especially those in high risk categories or those that are immune compromised, may wish to supplement our diet with these nutrients. Another area that comes to mind is getting enough protein and good fat, which allows our immune system to optimally function and also helps us prevent inflammation. I'm also encouraging my family to intake a good amount of fermented food. This can be sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt, fermented vegetables, fermented beverages. But the probiotics that are contained in fermented foods are known to keep our gut healthy. And the health of our gut is integral to the health of our immune system. Finally, this may not need to be said, but for some of us, when we are facing great levels of anxiety and uncertainty, it may be difficult for us to remember to sit down and eat a nourishing meal, especially if you're a caretaker right now and you're making preparations not just for yourself or your family, but for other loved ones. I've found talking to many of my clients that it's been very easy for us to skip a meal here and there because we're so busy preparing for the uncertainty of what may come next. And so, to that end, I encourage all of us to remember to sit down and have a meal every day. And if that feels concerning to you, then I encourage you to think about ways that you can have simple snacks prepared and ready for you so that even if the day is busy, there's something you can reach out and grab. I know one tool that's been really important for me in the last few weeks to have some nourishment even when I'm on the go are Rosemary Gladstar's recipe for Zoom balls. I take a different take on her recipe. I call mine ninja balls. It's basically nut butters and honey mixed together with powdered herbs. And I call mine ninja balls because I'm including in them some of the nutritive and adaptogenic herbs that I want to be taking right now to support my nervous system and my overall wellness. Other aspects to discuss in terms of nourishment are those things that we may want to limit or reduce in our diet for the sake of our immune health. And probably most of you know the list that I'm about to share. Things like sugar, alcohol, processed foods, and other foods that might contribute to inflammation. Many of you are aware that you're gluten intolerant, and when you eat bread and crackers and baked goods, it causes inflammation. It's easy to let that go in times of health, but in times of pandemic, it's more important than ever to limit the inflammation that we create in our own body by the foods that we eat. Similarly, some of you know that you're a little inflamed by nightshades or other processed foods. So take the opportunity now to start to build healthier dietary habits so that you can support your immune system to its highest functioning. In addition to nourishment, there are other aspects of caring for myself the way I've always aspired to that are really becoming priority right now in my own life and those of my clients. These are things like movement. Many cities have enacted a shelter-in-place order that exempts individuals from going on solitary outdoor exercise. This is an absolutely important time for us to get outside for some fresh air and take a walk, or to find other forms of movement. I know in my own home, there's been yoga and Pilates and just simple stretching day to day that helps me get some movement in and also allows me to stay in a place of calm. Walking outside though, taking a walk, taking a hike in your backyard, these are really important elements. Keeping our body moving right now is really important, not just for our immune system, but also for our emotional well-being. Proper sleep is also really, really important right now. And I know that's easy to say, but when we're dealing with anxiety, sleep is sometimes the first thing to go. I know a lot of my friends and clients have been disrupted in their sleep, waking up in the middle of the night, worried and anxious about the uncertainties of the future. If that's you, but you're also finding yourself at home because you've been furloughed from work or otherwise are social distancing, I encourage you to pick up the practice of taking a nap. I know in the last few weeks when I feel my anxiety reaching a peak, instead of having a toddler temper tantrum, I try to have a toddler nap instead. And I found these moments of respite during the day to give me the reset that I need to continue forth with clarity in my mind and courage in my heart. Finally, I want to encourage you to hydrate properly every day. Our immune system needs us to drink water, and we are a chronically dehydrated society. So be sure to drink lots and lots of water. Squeeze a little lemon in it if you want, or a dash of peppermint to make the flavor improve a bit for you. But please stay hydrated. Hydration is so important to our immune health. And I also find it's important to my mental health too. When I sit down to drink a glass of water, I try to take just one moment to be paused and present and to give thanks for the water, give thanks for the earth, and to really call upon the elements of nature as I sip on that water to keep me healthy and also to keep my planet healthy. In addition to caring for ourselves like we've aspired to, this is now the time to care for our immunities like we've always aspired to. There are a number of community mutual aid organizations and initiatives that are starting. I will share a link to those resources in the handout. I encourage you to find the mutual aid initiative in your local community and learn how you can be involved. If you are currently not working, but you have a vehicle and you have a healthy immune system, perhaps you can provide a grocery or pharmaceutical delivery for someone that can't. If you have a big garden and you're in a southern climate, so it's already popping up right now, and you have some extra vegetables and medicine to share, your community needs you. Mutual aid, even through social isolation, is one of the most important medicines that we can lean into right now to ensure that ourselves, our families, and our communities remain well through this pandemic. Now, I'd like to speak to community care as it relates to protection, because for me, this is one of the most important discussions in a conversation about community health. And that is, how can we protect ourselves, but more importantly, how can we protect our community from the escalating spread of this viral infection? First of all, please listen to quarantine recommendations. Please socially distance. Please do not leave your home. Please do not go shopping for non-essential things if you do not have to. This is so important. Even if you seem healthy, you may be a carrier of the virus, and we are seeing more and more cases of asymptomatic carriers transmitting the virus to other individuals who are getting gravely sick. So if you do not have to leave your home right now, do not go out. If you don't have to go grocery shopping, please don't go. If you have to go grocery shopping, don't bring the whole family along. Elect one member of your family to go into town and to interact with people. Right now, social distancing and quarantining ourselves is one of the most important things we can do to keep our communities healthy. Now, if you do have to go out and get some groceries or supplies, I encourage you to create a quarantine zone in your home. This is also true for any deliveries, curbside delivery, mail order delivery of supplies that you might be receiving. A quarantine area can be as simple as a few square feet. I encourage you to mark it off with some masking tape or other way to determine where your quarantine zone is. And this is an area where you leave everything from outside the home so that it has a chance to dissipate the viral load. As many of you have seen, viruses can live on things like stainless steel and plastic for up to 72 hours. So everything that you bring into your home from the grocery store or everything you pick up at the mailbox, those are all should be considered potentially infected. And creating a quarantine zone allows you to leave those items in a place long enough for them to dissipate and that viral load to decrease. You can also use disinfectants like Lysol or bleach or hydrogen peroxide or isopropyl alcohol on items that definitely must come in. If you're looking at foods, remember to always wash fresh foods and thinking about foods that are prepared, heating them up as quickly as possible, making sure that you have a decontamination process in place. Now, you should remember that your shoes are always infected. You should think about them as always carrying a viral load. So always take your shoes off as well when you come into that quarantine area and leave them there. Don't traipse them through the rest of the house, or you can consider the rest of the house to also be contaminated. If you are outside of your home, please maintain a 6-foot distance from others. And you may, in addition, wish to wear a mask. Though, as many of us know, our healthcare professionals are currently experiencing a shortage of masks. And this is something that I feel like is a really serious issue for the safety of our healthcare system, and something that we need to be really mindful of. If you've hoarded a bunch of N95 masks at your home, more than you need for your family, please share those with healthcare providers. Please know that a lot of the patterns for sewing masks for yourself are not necessarily going to be safe enough for a healthcare provider working in an ICU. Please consider the health of our community, as well as your own personal health and the health of your family. Many people that are stockpiling resources right now are making it so that those resources, including basic food items, are no longer available for individuals that need them most. So if you do have a mask, I encourage you to use it when you're outside to protect others. And if you have a stockpile of them, I encourage you to share them with local health professionals who are very much in need of these personal protective equipment at this time. As many of you know, you can sanitize your hands when you are out, but it is nowhere near as effective as washing your hands with hot soapy water for at least 20 seconds. In the resources that I'll share, I'll be sharing some information from Dr. Aviva Ram that I feel like really encapsulates good hand washing practices. And one thing that I learned from one of her articles was the phrase, dance like nobody's watching and wash your hands like the world is watching. So please note that washing your hands for at least 20 seconds with hot soapy water before you prepare food, after you prepare food, after you've touched a doorknob, after you've gone into public, these are really important practices that we should not dismiss. Please wash your hands as often as possible. And after you've washed your hands, please be careful of touching your face. I know many of us are learning right now how habitual it is for us to touch our face regularly. But I really encourage you to be mindful of how much you touch your face. For me, wearing a mask keeps me from thinking about touching my face when I'm outside. And also wearing nitrile gloves keeps me from thinking about touching my face. So perhaps there is a gimmick like that, or a technique like that that can help you touch your face less when you go outside. I also encourage you to use good humidity practices in your home. I know for those of you that are my students in Central Florida, it's pretty humid down there as it is. But those of you that live in more temperate climates, or even climates that are still experiencing winter, and you have a wood stove or propane heat on right now, please consider the humidity level of the atmosphere inside your home is one of the non-pharmaceutical interventions for pneumonia, and can be really important in keeping ambient humidity for protecting your immune system right now. It's recommended to keep humidity between 40 and 60%, and that can be achieved in a dry household by a humidifier, an electric humidifier, or by simmering a pot of water on your stovetop. Bonus, if you're simmering that pot of water on the stovetop, you could also add herbs like rosemary or thyme or cinnamon or camphor leaves as a way to not just freshen the air and give you some aromatherapy, but also to aerosolize those aromatic particles and contribute to some very mild disinfectant of the atmosphere in your home. Now, I encourage you, whether you are using a simmering pot on the stove for humidity, or whether you are working with steams, which we'll be talking about in some of my classes later this week for respiratory health, but I really encourage you to limit your use of essential oils right now. One, essential oils and steams can be very caustic to our mucous membranes. And the whole point of keeping humidity high in our homes is to protect our mucous membranes. Essential oils, when we use them in a steam, can be very irritating and up to being very caustic on our mucous membranes. So I encourage you instead to use the plant material itself, and to be very diligent with your use of essential oils. Of course, this is not just for protecting our mucous membranes, but this is also because essential oils are very resource dependent plant medicines. And if we are facing an interruption in the supply chain, we won't be able to guarantee that we can source those oils as readily as we used to. And those oils take up a lot of plant resources. So for health and for sustainability, I encourage you to limit your use of essential oils and look to the plants themselves that contain those aromatic compounds. Some of you may also feel called to do saltwater gargles as a way to protect the mucosa of your throat, and those are really great practices as well. Now, throughout the week, myself and my colleagues at the Florida School of Holistic Living will be sharing workshops every day to address particular aspects of immune care, antiviral strategies, respiratory health, nourishment, and emotional wellness. And we'll be looking at specific herbal strategies for each of those areas. But I did want to briefly introduce a couple areas of herbal support that most of you can find in your own kitchen cabinets that can be really useful for protecting your immune system during this time. The first are those amazing medicines found in your spice cabinet, our culinary herbs. I was thinking the other day of the Simon and Garfunkel song that says parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme. Those are the precise herbs that we want to be consuming right now to support our immune system. So consider spicing up any of your meals, making some soups, and otherwise learning how you can creatively incorporate those plants into your daily routine. Some of you may know of a recipe called fire cider, which has become very famous from my teacher, herbalist Rosemary Gladstar. This is the great time for us to pull out that fire cider and start using it on a daily basis to support our health and wellness. Some of the ingredients that you find in fire cider, like onion and garlic and turmeric, horseradish, cayenne pepper, ginger, these are great spices to begin to build into your culinary practice on a daily basis. Consider chopping up some root vegetables and roasting them, adding some herbs to the end. These are definitely the plants that we want to be relying on right now to keep ourselves healthy. I've been working on a batch of onion garlic syrup today as we speak, and that's another remedy that's really important for keeping our health uh, optimal and keeping our immune system strong during this time. I'm also looking to herbs that are popping up right now in our backyards for many of us in springtime that will help move energy and fluids through our body. I'm thinking about herbs like cleavers, chickweed, dandelion greens, violet, clover, nettles are popping up. Purslane is coming up right now in Central Florida, moringa in South Florida, bidens all throughout the Southeast. I'm calling upon these plants and adding them to my daily diet for the broad nutrients that they provide as wild foods, but also because these plants help our lymphatic system stay in flow. We really need plants right now that will keep our lymphatic system healthy to support our immune system. So thinking about those tonics that help get things moving in our body is one way that we can really support our health right now. Now, another class of herbs that I'm really calling on right now are those slimaceous herbs that contain a lot of mucilage. Now, some of you may be unfamiliar with the term mucilage. It's a plant constituent that helps to soothe and protect our mucous membranes. Think about when you cook okra and that slimy goo that's produced, that's mucilage. Mucilage-rich herbs are really important to keeping our mucosa protected and also to combat the dryness of the symptoms of coronavirus, which is typified with a dry cough, and also to counterbalance the dryness of many of the herbs, like nettle, for example, that are really important for us to use right now, but that may be drying by nature. The plants that are slimaceous that I like to use in concert to bring a more energetic balance to these formulas are things like marshmallow or any plants in the mallow family. Ceta is one of those locally, or Caesar weed's another in Central Florida that we might find in our backyards. I've been using roselle, hibiscus leaves, which are nice and mucilaginous. Of course, okra is great. Chia seeds and flax seeds can be a nice addition, and even spiderwort, which is rich in mucilage. I like to use spiderwort flowers and leaves in my salads, and then I steam up the stems, much like asparagus, to get all of that goo and to balance the moisture with some of the drying herbs that we may otherwise be using to combat infection. Finally, I'm going to give a big nod to fresh fruits and vegetables. I'm especially interested in bringing as many berries into my diet right now as possible for those dark blue and red antioxidants and flavonoids. So things like raspberries and blueberries and blackberries. But in Central Florida right now, mulberries are ripe in the wild. So we might do some foraging. And even orange and red antioxidants and other fruits and vegetables can be really helpful. So for friends in Central Florida, the loquat fruits are peaking right now on the trees. And so that might be an area that we consider sourcing some good antioxidants from. With any of these fruits and vegetables, I encourage you to consider drying or canning some of these fruits and vegetables. So if we do have an interruption in supply chain and you're not able to source fresh fruits at the market like you normally do, you have access to these foods during times that may be more difficult. One more food preparation that is really important in my home right now are soups, either bone broth or mushroom broth, depending on if you're vegetarian or not, or you can mix them both together if you're feeling creative. But these are really important soups to keep our immune system strong. And also these are really great for hydration. And I find soups just to be really calming and soothing, really kind of a comfort food for me. You can have these as a broth just to sip on out of a tea mug. I like to flavor mine with all those nice spicy herbs from my culinary kitchen spice cabinet. Or otherwise, you can use these as a base for other dishes that you may cook, or cooking rice in broth or things like that. But I really encourage every family to have a stock pot on hand at all times of these broths to keep ourselves healthy. One thing that I like to do when I'm making fire cider, for instance, is I chop up my onion and my garlic, and then I leave the ends and the skins aside, and I use those also in my stocks and soup so I can get all of the nutrients out of those vegetables and leave nothing to waste. Many of us have a lot of bioregional plants popping up right now that you might also look at. I'm thinking about pepperweed and dollarweed in my own backyard. And I also want to remind you all of the great opportunities that we have to grow sprouts and microgreens in our kitchen. Even if we don't have big garden beds or it's too cold outside where you live to grow a garden right now, consider growing some microgreens or some sprouts in your kitchen so that you can have access to those fresh vitamins and minerals. Now, one more nutrient that I think is really important and overlooked is oxygen. And I want to remind us all of the power of breath work to support our respiratory health and our immune health, but also to support our emotional wellness. Many of you know that in a number of systems of medicine, especially in the Eastern Hemisphere, the lungs are considered the place in our body where we hold grief. And grief is a conversation that I think is really important for us to have in our families and communities right now, because we're experiencing a lot of it, even if we don't recognize it. There is the grief over our future plans and the uncertainty that is before us. Many of us are experiencing grief over the loss of our livelihood and uncertainties with our job and our financial stability. And worst of all, many of us are experiencing grief over the loss of loved ones who have been affected by this virus. All of that grief sits in our lungs. And one way that I have found historically to be really healing to help work with that grief in a more constructive way is by practicing breath work. In the resource handout that I'll be sharing, there will be some links to some Qigong Shaolin breathwork practices that were shared with me by a teacher that have been very helpful for me at this time. I think about emotion as if it's energy in motion. And when that energy doesn't move, that's where it feels stuck, and we feel stuck in those emotions. So breathwork can be a really powerful tool for us to move through confusion, anxiety, fear, and grief during this time, and help us to take that energy and move it through our body so we can use it more constructively. And I encourage you, whether it's just a deep breath right now, sitting in your seat while you're watching this video, or a daily practice that you start first thing in the morning when you wake up, please consider giving some extra attention to your lungs by doing a breathwork practice of some kind every day to help support your respiratory health, your immune health, and to support your emotional well-being. Now, later this week, myself and my colleagues, Maggie O'Halloran and Debbie Krause, we'll be offering a 5-part video series. Monday, we'll be covering protection and prevention, looking at food and herbs and other protocol we can use to support our immune system. Tuesday, I'll be speaking about specific antiviral herbal protocol that can be used right now to support our health and our well-being. Wednesday, Maggie O'Halloran will be talking about nourishment for our immune system and how food can be medicine. Thursday, Debbie Krause will be speaking about respiratory health and how we can use herbs and food to love our lungs. And Friday, I'll be back to share herbal strategies for emotional well-being. I hope that you will consider joining us for one or all of those classes. We are offering them at a very low cost and also offering open scholarships for anyone with financial need, so that no one should consider not taking advantage of these teachings. And we hope you will all join us. The classes will be recorded, so if you're not able to join us at the time that they're offered, you'll receive the video afterwards, as well as a handout of resources. Now, before I let you go, I want to offer you a little bit of homework, and I hope that's okay. But I found that it's been so important for me personally, and also for my friends, to remind me that we have to be gentle with ourselves right now. Like I said earlier, this is an uncertain time, not just for you and I, but for governments, municipal leaders, healthcare leaders, and even the large organizations at the national and global level that are responding to this pandemic. So feelings of confusion and anxiety are very, very normal. In fact, they're really healthy. If you're not a little concerned and anxious right now, I would be concerned myself. So I encourage you to be gentle with those feelings, to allow yourself those feelings, allow yourself the breakdown, and allow yourself the nap. None of us can be expected to operate in perfect form right now with all of the pressures that are coming upon us. But to that end, I have found that it's been very helpful for me to center my focus, especially when I'm anxious, on what are the things in my life that I love, and what are things in my life that bring me joy, that are activities I can still engage in, even through social distancing. And so that is my homework to you. I encourage you to grab a piece of paper or a note card and write down on one side, what do I love? Who and what in my life brings me the greatest connection? Why am I living this life for? Who are my loved ones? Who do I love? What do I love? Reminding myself of the things that I love and the people that I love gives me a little bit of extra courage and strength and motivation to continue putting one foot in front of the other in this time that's very difficult to navigate my path. The other list is what brings me joy. And these are simple activities that we can engage in to bring ourselves back to a place of center and peace amidst all the chaos. Now, I recognize that for a lot of us, what brings us joy are activities that we can't engage in right now because of social distancing. But I'm also confident that for many of us, there are other activities that we can look to bring ourselves some joy and some centeredness. So it might be a crossword puzzle, or it might be a video, or it might be playing with an animal companion, or it might be simply gardening, which is a great activity right now, very practical and very peaceful. Or maybe it's just sitting drinking a cup of tea. But I encourage you to make a list of what you love and what brings you joy, so that in your daily life, when you're feeling that panic rising, you can revisit those two lists. And I hope that by reflecting on those you love and the things that bring you joy, that it will give you a moment of calm to cultivate more clarity and courage to step forward. Now, I also encourage you to think about some of the practices I mentioned for keeping our immune system healthy, like nourishment, movement, sleep, hydration. And if you're not doing those things already, think about one thing that you can add to your daily routine to bring that immune wellness into your daily life. Finally, something that I think is really big medicine right now is what we can be grateful for. There's a lot that we can all be sad about, anxious about, complaining about. I mean, the list goes on and on for each one of us in a single day. But if we can center our focus on the things that we're grateful for, what do we still have despite what all that we're losing, then for me, that gives me a little bit more motivation and a little bit more courage to step one foot in front of the other. Again, I'll be sharing a link on the School of Holistic Living website, which has more resources and information about what we've covered here today. And also, I encourage you to join us for our 5-part workshop series that starts on Monday. From the bottom of my heart, I wish you in this difficult time great calm and clarity and courage. Lean into the plants and lean into your community. We can do this together. Much love and many blessings.